my friends and I discovered a hidden wildlife sanctuary. The animals here are unusual. By Redditor A.J. Crowley 29. I am currently 18 years old, finishing up my senior year of high school. Throughout grade school, many friends came and went, but only 4 are important for this story. I won't use their real names. There was Johnny, a 19-year-old who had yet to start college, said something about getting his shit together before he went away, whatever that meant. He was never one to have his life all squared away nicely, if you get what I mean. Still a very nice guy though, would probably jump in front of a bullet for any one of us. Julia, also 19 but already in college. She was visiting home for the summer. She was a bright, happy soul, and her smile made the rest of us smile, especially Johnny. I suspected he had a slight crush on her. I wish he got the chance to tell her how he really felt. They would have made a good couple, and she could definitely help him with his troubles at home. Her brother, Edmund or Ed, was 16, the youngest of us all. He was also slightly autistic, but that's not too important. All it meant was he would talk under his breath sometimes, and you'd occasionally have to repeat yourself to get his attention. He loved the outdoors, but was a bit of a neat freak, always bringing hand sanitizer and bear spray with him whenever we went romping about in the woods. Despite the fact no bears have been seen in our town for over 5 years. Lastly, there's Teddy, a high-wired, nerdy 17-year-old with orange, curly hair like Ms. Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. He's tall and lanky, and back when creepypastas were a big thing on the internet, we convinced him to dress as Slender Man for Halloween. Gotta admit, it was a pretty scary costume. He actually pranked us with it a couple times while all those fake Slender Man sighting videos and short films were floating around the web and had everyone convinced the thing was actually real. I remember vividly how he snuck into my house one morning with the costume and stood at the foot of my bed until I woke up. I think I screamed so loud the neighbors down the street heard it. But Teddy's favorite interest was biology, specifically paleontology. He would always try to tell us about the coolest new prehistoric species or dinosaur that had been discovered recently. The others humored it, especially Ed, who seemed greatly interested in the subject as well. I never shared their enthusiasm though. I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but I didn't really want to hear about the brand new Superceratops or Ceratospinus or whatever crazy names he would ramble on about. As I mentioned earlier, one of our favorite activities was running around the woods. We live in a fairly populated suburb of western North Carolina. Despite that, our town bordered the Appalachian Mountain Range, and the town was surrounded by massive expanses of forest and open prairie, some of it practically unexplored. There were some patches of land that were labeled private property and no trespassers allowed, but nobody really knew who owned the land. Apparently it was a dangerous place, and the people who went there sometimes didn't return. The big urban legend about it was of a creature called the Fleshgate, an animalistic monster that could take the form of a man after consuming his remains. It was essentially our town's boogeyman, a tall tale used to scare kids into eating their vegetables and following their curfews, lest the Fleshgate snatch them up and turn them into child stew. I won't lie, it scared the bejesus out of me when I was that age, until I grew up and researched it, learning it was basically a rip-off of the more well-known Native American Skinwalker Story. So of course, there was no Fleshgate. But the real reason for the private land and the unexplained disappearances remained a mystery. Well, one day, in the early morning sun of June, me and my little crew set out on another expedition into the woods. It was to be an exciting adventure. We would follow a small creek farther than we ever had before, mapping out whatever we found at its end. We would look for unique landmarks, good trees to climb, and any sight, sound or smell of wild animals. We had seen deer, fox, coyote, skunk, possum and raccoon all in the surrounding woods, but we wanted to find something big, something extraordinary. A bear, a moose, a mountain lion, a wolf. We even teased each other about finding the legendary Fleshgate, maybe tracking it to its lair. And using rock clubs and spears to hunt the beast down and make the forest safe for all the children. We began our journey at dawn, for that was the best time to spot animals. It was right before the nighttime critters were ready to retire to their dens, and right when the other inhabitants of the forest were starting the day shift. The creek, which Johnny had given a cliché name Creek of John since he discovered it, ran for a long while, winding through the trees, past peaceful meadows, down rocky waterfalls. But where it ended we did not know. That was what we intended to find out today. We followed the stream down its usual route, under the large oak trees that shaded us from the sun, past the peaceful meadows where the rabbits played and cuddled, down the precarious waterfalls where the minnows and frogs sat at the bottom, ready to gobble up any insects that fell in, and we went further and further. We followed the stream for a good 45 minutes. Eventually, we did find its end. The path up ahead was obscured by a small hill. No way the stream was making it over that. Johnny, Julia, and Edmund were thrilled. Teddy was happy but clearly exhausted. We had gone much farther than initially anticipated. We rushed down to the bottom of the hill, but the sight that met us left us truly puzzled. The water trickled into a medium-sized pool, but it was not the only thing filling it. There was a pipe sticking out from the side of the hill. It looked like it had been deliberately placed there to empty water from an unknown source. "What the heck is this?" Julia asked. "Maybe it's connected to the town's reservoir?" Teddy pondered. "I don't know, but that's some freaky-looking shit right there." Was all Johnny could get out before Julia punched him on the arm. "Ow! What was that for?" She gestured over to Edmund, and immediately Johnny understood. Edmund got really uncomfortable when people sweared. We never knew exactly why, but Julia said her grandparents weren't exactly the kindest to him. And it only worsened when they learned of his conditions. I found it shocking that an elder could be mean like that, especially to a kid. "Look, I'm sorry, all right?" Johnny continued, raising his hands up defensively. "But seriously, look at that. Tell me it doesn't look like something out of a cabin in the woods." "What, you think the Fleshgate put it there?" asked Julia with a smug look on her face. "Of course not," exclaimed Johnny. "That's just a kid's story." Suddenly, as if on horror movie K, there was a rustling in the bushes to our left. We all looked over, and I'll admit Johnny looked genuinely frightened, like he was starting to doubt his previous statement. A bizarre growling sound emanated from the bush, and we could see a quadrupedal figure slowly emerging. I sucked in my breath as I came face to face with a fox. We all sighed in relief as the curious canine eyed us. It turned and trotted away into the forest after a few moments of silent staring. We then resumed our confusion over the random pipe in the middle of a forest. Teddy had the idea to check if it was connected to anything, so we got down on our hands and knees and began digging. Sure enough, another pipe emerged from the side of the hill in a few minutes. Teddy put his ear to it and listened. We sat there in anticipation, waiting for him to describe what he was hearing. It was not what we expected. "This isn't emptying water," he said. "It's carrying water somewhere else." "What?" I said. "That's not possible, it's emptying right over there, look." I pointed to the small pool and the draining pipe. "That's gotta be a different pipe then," Teddy said. "This one's connected to somewhere else." I was about to retort when Ed interrupted me, speaking for the first time since we found the pipe. "You guys," he said. "Do you see that up there?" He was pointing at the top of the hill. When we all looked, we saw nearly all the trees had private property signs. One even had a warning label, like going further was dangerous. "Dang," I said. "How did we not see that before?" though I already knew the answer. Ed had a knack for noticing things before everyone else, even as a little boy. I guess he's very attentive to his surroundings. "You guys, I think we should turn back," Johnny suddenly said. "I really don't think we should be sticking our noses where they don't belong, especially if this place belongs to someone else." "Are you kidding?" Julia suddenly yelled. "This is the chance of a lifetime. We finally have a real mystery to solve." "Easy for you to say. You've never been in trouble with the law before." "What's that supposed to mean? Are you hiding stuff from us?" "What?" "And no. It was just one speeding ticket dash." "Both of you, cool it," Teddy yelled. "You're acting like a bunch of crazies." "Teddy's right," I added. "We aren't gonna get anywhere arguing like this. We should probably leave, I agree with Johnny. If this place is private property, I really don't want to get us all dragged into a legal mess, especially since my folks are Dash. I was cut off by a scream. Not a human scream, but a fox's distressed yelp. It sounded like something was attacking it. The sound suddenly drew closer, turning into frantic alarm barks. I had heard this sound only once before, when a fox being chased by a coyote ran into my backyard and hid under my dad's shed. The fox in that scenario got away, but this one seemed in a much worse predicament. We all looked to the top of the hill and saw the same fox from earlier running down it. It had a bloody wound on its side, and was moving as fast as it could. It ran down the hill, past the pool we were standing next to, and into a small field of tall sedge grass. That's when we first saw it, one of them. A dark shadow suddenly appeared in the field. It was the size of a Labrador, and from its outline seemed to walk on two legs, but with the straightforward posture of a bird. It also had a long tail, with some kind of fluff hanging off at the end. It ran after the fox faster than any animal I had ever seen, yet its movements were almost completely silent. It was as if this thing had an aura of quietness around it. It suddenly leaped into the air, and came down upon the fox. A brief struggle ensued as the two creatures tumbled through the field and out of view. A small cloud of dust rose, and we could hear the fox desperately screaming. It was clearly caught in the predator's talons and fighting for its life. The screams were suddenly cut off though, and we heard a sharp yet silent snap, the sound of the fox's neck being broken. It was over in a heartbeat. Silence once again filled the field, as if the shadowy creature had never been there in the first place. Yet it still was. We could hear its faint panting as it caught its breath. My mouth hung open as my mind tried to process what the hell I just saw. It didn't seem real, and yet it very much was. I looked over to my friends, to see an equally shocked expression on each of their faces. Teddy, the one who had an answer to everything via math and science, looked purely and utterly dumbfounded. Ed looked like he was doubting his own eyes, much like me. Julia actually gagged a few times and looked like she was gonna hurl. She never was a fan of seeing animals do that whole circle of life stuff, not on TV and definitely not in person. Poor Johnny looked like he was scarred for life though, his lips were trembling and his eyes watered like he was on the verge of tears. He was the first to speak, and he said the one thing nobody wanted him to say in that moment. Fleshgate? That made my heart drop, as I'm sure it did the others. I didn't think for certain that it actually was the Fleshgate, but just the thought made me shiver. I could already see Julia and Ed taking a few nervous steps back. Ed spoke up next, in a hushed, scared voice. Let's just leave, guys. I was gonna say something, likely and I agree before booking it the hell out of there and never returning, but then Teddy did something that caught us all off guard. He ran up the hill, right toward the sedge field. Johnny tried to grab him, but missed. Julia shouted out a desperate Teddy, wait, and poor Ed looked like he was gonna pass out. We tore up the hill after him, but the kid must have been real motivated because he outpaced all of us, even Julia the gold medal track runner. He made it over the crest of the hill and out of sight, all the while we shouted his name. Horrible images ran through my mind, the Fleshgate waiting for us at the top of the hill, assuming the form of Teddy after disemboweling him. Or maybe an FBI truck with loads of armed men ready to gun us down for exposing their hidden alien experiments. What we found was Teddy standing motionless, staring off at the bottom of the hill. Johnny caught up to him first. I swear, for that I ought to kick your dash. But he stopped, his own gaze following Teddy's. Me, Julia and Ed caught up to them next. What are you two looking a dash? But my words once again left me, at the sight of something I'll never forget for as long as I live. At the edge of the grassy clearing, stood a strange animal. It was hunched over the corpse of the fox, stripping a long piece of meat from the body. It wasn't a violent display, but delicate and refined, like an eagle eating a fish. It used its rather long arms to help it scoop up the food, and I could see at least 3 fingers tipped with small claws. The animal was indeed bipedal, but its legs were anything but human-like, its knees were high up, and so were the ankles. I couldn't see the feet at first. What I did see was how long the thing was. It had a massive tail that extended behind it, stiff and unmoving like a board. Altogether it must have been 9 feet long. The most peculiar thing about this animal, though, was the fact that it was covered, practically head to toe, in feathers. Its entire upper body had dark feathers, ranging in shade from black to gray to brown. The tail and arms both had longer feathers extending from them, looking like fancy wings. The underside had much lighter feathers, they were also a bit shorter. It looked to be a bit yellowish on the belly. Its head was partially obscured by a bush, so I couldn't fully see its face, but it seemed to also be feathered, at least partially. I had never even heard of a creature like this before. What on earth was it? The flesh gate? Not a chance. This thing was much too elegant to be the awful, disfigured monster described in campfire tales. Some kind of undiscovered exotic bird? Maybe, the truly bizarre plumage would make sense in that case. But what's an exotic bird doing in North Carolina? Teddy had the answer before all of us though. Only problem, he was also stupid enough to say it out loud when we were in earshot of it. No effing way, that's a dash. Julia slapped a hand over his mouth, but it was already too late. The creature immediately stopped eating, its head slightly perking up. I heard a strange chirping or hooting noise, like a bird or owl but deeper in pitch. Then, in a surprisingly fast motion, the animal shot out of the brush and now stood only 10 feet from us. It didn't attack, just stared at us with apparent curiosity. With its body in full view, I noticed details I had missed before. Firstly, its face. The face resembled an eagle or hawk, but instead of a beak there was a long, scaly snout like a Komodo dragon. The eyes were orange with big pupils, also like a bird. It looked at us inquisitively with those eyes, and I felt like I saw intelligence in them. It was kinda scary, but its face made it look kind of cute. That's the best way I can describe it, at least. The only thing not very cute was the blood dripping from its lips and finger claws. It also had 2 orange streaks above its eyes, looking almost like fiery eyebrows. Now I could finally see its feet. They looked almost exactly like hawk's talons, but one claw, the front one, was much bigger than the others. I mean, they were huge. It reminded me of the claws of the... Wait. You gotta be fucking kidding me. The realization hit me like a brick, and I could only stare in complete awe and utter confusion as Julia whispered to Teddy. What did you say this thing was again? Deinonychus anteropus, he said, his voice shaking. It's a dash. Dinosaur. I finished his sentence for him. A dinosaur. We were looking at a goddamn dinosaur.